We are told it was the greatest love story of the 20th century. A king, Edward VIII, so hopelessly devoted to an American divorcee, Wallis Simpson, that he sacrificed the most powerful throne on earth to be with her. We are shown black and white photos of a sad, elegant couple living in exile, victims of a rigid establishment. It is a fairy tale. But fairy tales are for children. History is for those who have the stomach for the truth. Edward VIII did not abdicate solely for love. He didn't leave England just to marry a woman. He left because his soul was already sold. While London was burning, while his subjects were being crushed under the rubble of the Blitz, the former King of England was not praying for their survival. He was on the phone with the enemy. He was negotiating his return. He wasn't waiting for peace. He was waiting for the Wehrmacht to march down the Mall. He was waiting to take his seat on a throne propped up by bayonets and swastikas. This isn't a theory. We have the receipts. May 1945. The war is ending. The Third Reich is collapsing in a storm of fire and ultimate ruin. Deep in the Harz Mountains of Germany, American soldiers stumble upon a stranded Nazi convoy. They aren't looking for gold. They find something far more dangerous. 400 tons of diplomatic archives. Among them, a specific collection of papers wrapped in oilcloth to survive the damp. The Marburg Files. When the contents of these papers were reported to London, the reaction wasn't relief. It was pure, unadulterated terror. King George VI, Edward's brother, was physically sickened. Winston Churchill, usually the man of iron resolve, went into a panic. He didn't want these files read by historians. He wanted them burned. He wrote to President Eisenhower begging him to block the publication, claiming the documents were biased and unreliable. Why were the victors so afraid of a few pieces of paper? Because one telegram, dated July 1940, contained a sentence that could destroy the monarchy forever. The German ambassador reported a conversation with the Duke. The Duke believes with certainty that continued heavy bombing will make England ready for peace. Let that sink in. The former King of England was advising the enemy to bomb his own people harder, to crush their spirit, to kill more civilians in order to force a surrender that would pave the way for his return. This wasn't just unpatriotic, it was high treason written in ink. You might be asking, how does a monarch turn into a monster? To understand the rot, we have to look at who he was admiring. In 1937, Edward and Wallis toured Nazi Germany. The footage is chilling. Edward isn't just polite, he is enthusiastic. At the Berghof, he extends his arm in a crisp Nazi salute to Adolf Hitler. Hitler later said, "I am certain through him, permanent friendly relations could have been achieved. If he had stayed, everything would have been different." Hitler saw Edward not as a foe, but as a sleeping asset. And in the summer of 1940, with Europe drowning in blood, he decided it was time to wake him up. July 1940. Britain is standing alone against the Nazi war machine. An invasion seems inevitable. And where is Edward? He is in Lisbon, Portugal. But he isn't staying at a hotel. He is staying at a private villa in Cascais. Now, look at the owner of this villa, Ricardo Espírito Santo. Officially, he is a Portuguese banker. Unofficially, he is a man known to British intelligence as a German sympathizer and a master of laundering Nazi gold. Edward didn't just stumble into this house. He walked into a nest that was prepared for him. The walls had ears. The servants were spies. And the man sent to handle him wasn't a diplomat. It was a predator. His name was Walter Schellenberg. He was an SS brigade Führer, only 30 years old, the youngest and most brilliant general in the SS. As the head of foreign intelligence, known for the dueling scar on his cheek and the cyanide capsule in his false tooth, he was given a specific mission, Operation Willi. Operation Willi wasn't a whim of Hitler. It was a calculated, sinister plot to kidnap the Duke of Windsor, psychologically or physically, and use him as a puppet king for a conquered Britain. Schellenberg was given unlimited funds and authorization to use force. But here is the darkest part. He didn't need to use force. Schellenberg and the Spanish diplomats fed Edward a narrative. The British Secret Service wants to kill you. Churchill is your enemy. The only way to regain your dignity and your crown is through a German victory. Edward didn't report these approaches. He didn't run to the British embassy. Why? Because deep down he agreed with them. He viewed the British Parliament as weak. He despised the Reds. And he shared the Nazi hatred of the Jews. He didn't see himself as a traitor. He saw himself as a visionary who was denied his birthright. He wanted to return to London not as a constitutional monarch, but as a ruler with absolute power, ready to purge the enemies of the state, just as his friends in Berlin were doing. He wasn't being tricked. He was waiting for his job offer. The British government realized the danger. Churchill knew that if the Germans invaded and Edward was there to greet them, the country would split in two. Civil war would follow occupation. Churchill issued an ultimatum. Go to the Bahamas as governor, or face a court-martial for desertion. Edward dragged his feet. He panicked. He sent telegrams to the Nazis asking for advice, and Schellenberg launched his final gambit. The plan was straight out of a noir thriller. Schellenberg paid Portuguese police to harass the Duke. He arranged for stones to be thrown at the villa's windows to simulate British Secret Service agents attacking. He even sent a bouquet of flowers to Wallis with a warning note, trying to terrify her into staying in Europe under German protection. The climax happened at the Lisbon docks. The ship SS Excalibur was waiting to take Edward to the Bahamas. Schellenberg was there, watching from a car. He had a sniper team ready. Their orders were not to kill the Duke, but to shoot out the tires of his limousine if he tried to board, create a panic, and rescue him in the chaos, spiriting him away to Spain. The engine of the ship was running. The luggage was loaded. Schellenberg's hand was hovering over the signal. But at the last second, Edward's nerve failed. Perhaps he realized that once he crossed the border into Spain, he would no longer be a guest. He would be a prisoner. He boarded the ship. The sleeping asset had escaped. But he didn't stop being a liability. Churchill hoped the Bahamas would be a quiet exile. He was wrong. Edward treated the governorship not as a duty, but as a burden. Forget the romantic image of the sad exile. Let's look at the governance dossier of Edward, Duke of Windsor. First, consider his race relations. He openly despised the local population. In official letters, he referred to black Bahamians using derogatory racial epithets. When they protested for fair wages, he didn't negotiate. He violently suppressed the riots and banned the singing of "God Save the King," claiming they didn't deserve to sing it. Second, his corruption. While Britain was rationing food, Edward was illegally trading currency. He was hoarding US dollars and betting against the British pound, effectively betting against his own country's survival for personal profit. And third, the frame-up. This is the darkest chapter. When Sir Harry Oakes, the richest man in the Bahamas, was found brutally murdered in his bed, Edward took control. He refused to call Scotland Yard. Instead, he hired 2 corrupt detectives from Miami. Why? Because he wanted to pin the murder on Count de Marigny, Oakes's son-in-law, simply because Edward hated him personally. The detectives were caught fabricating fingerprints to frame Marigny. The Duke of Windsor perverted the course of justice to settle a personal score. He wasn't just a traitor to his country, he was a petty tyrant. And this is far from the only instance of disgrace in the Windsor dynasty. From hidden cousins locked in asylums to cash for honors scandals, the history of this family is written in invisible ink. Maybe you know other secrets they are hiding? Write them in the comments. And if you want to uncover the real history of the ruling dynasties, hit that subscribe button. We find what they try to burn. Now, imagine if Operation Sea Lion had succeeded. Imagine if the RAF had failed. The image of 1941 would not be Churchill giving the V sign. It would be King Edward VIII, reinstated by the SS, sitting on the throne in Buckingham Palace. He would be signing a peace treaty while the swastika flag flew over Big Ben. The deportation of British Jews would have begun the next day with the king's signature on the order. He died in 1972, buried in the royal graveyard at Frogmore. But the question remains, who lies beneath that stone? A king or a traitor who got away with it? The files are still being opened, and with every new page, the love story dissolves, revealing the cold, hard face of fascism underneath.